Good morning, YouTube. I guess I'll give you guys a little weather update. It is windy out, and the last couple of days our monsoon has been blown back to life by a couple of hurricanes that slammed into Mexico's west coast, and that moisture has gotten sucked up in the monsoonal flow. You can see the tops of these trees up here are bending, and you know, I'm a pretty big guy, but I still get pushed around the road a bit by a stiff breeze. It sure does put a crimp on my riding. Normally I will ride to and from work every day, whether it's on the Enfield or one of the other bikes, and you know, that's part of my joy of bike ownership. There we go. Wow, look at that view. Now, I know the GoPro doesn't pick up those long shots very often, but wow, from here you can really see quite far. Entire valley, all the way down to the Santa Ritas, which are silhouetted down south there. Oh, now I'm riding right into that wind that was beating along my side a little bit ago. So in an effort to make my motovlogs better, I've been looking at interesting places around town that I will plan on making it to, and taking pictures in those places, and maybe even giving a little historic reference to each of those locations. There's lots of really interesting, cool things. There's some ghost towns near here. I can't take the Royal Enfield out on the big interstate or a lot of the bigger highways where the speed limit is 60 and above. I'll just burn up the motor getting there. Not only that, but Lord knows it'll take forever to get there, bumping along at 55 miles an hour. But what I'm planning is to be able to visit some of those places. I have a small trailer I can haul my bike around on. I plan on doing a movie in the very near future describing what it's like to shift a Royal Enfield, because the shifters are not at all like the Japanese bikes. You know, on this bike in particular, it was originally meant to be a 4-cylinder right-hand shift, 1 up and 3 down, but I guess for the American market they modified it. That was a little bike right there. But they modified it to be a left-hand shift, so there's all sorts of goofy linkage that makes the shifting really sloppy. But the transmission itself, oddly enough, the bike is called a Bullet, and the transmission itself is relatively bulletproof. It can handle a lot more horsepower than this bike will ever give it. And so in that regard, it's actually a decent transmission. And I will talk about gear spacing and things like that another time. And all the technical mumbo jumbo. Right over there is Anthony's Cigar Emporium, sloped roof. It's one of my favorite places in town to grab a smoke and sit down and talk with other cigar smokers. Which is again another one of those interests. Those who might remember my first motovlog, this would be the parking garage. There we go. I will stop for the ladies every single time. Go ahead. I will stop for the ladies every time. Well, that one movie theater, that one movie theater is the only thing now, and it's up on the 3rd floor where I'm at now. And so what happens is no one uses this garage, and with the onset of SUVs and pickup trucks and things like that, there just aren't a lot of vehicles that will bother coming in here for fear that they're going to scrape the roof in such a short parking structure. So I like it, because I'll come out here, and we're looking east right now. That saddle right there, I don't know how well the GoPro's going to pick it up. There's a saddle. You can see mountains over here topped by the clouds, and you can see this mountain over here. Those are the Santa Catalinas, those are the Rincon Mountains, and in between right there is a saddle. And that's directly east, and that saddle right there, the sun comes right up over it. And there are many times on the weekends when I'm trying to get away from it all. I wake up early typically during the week anyway, so my body's alarm clock will set me right. And I'll end up coming out here. I'll grab a seat right up against that wall right there, kind of watch the sun come up, maybe smoke a cigar, small cigar, drink a little bit of coffee, and kind of watch as things go on, and then I'll hop on the bike and go for a nice ride. I'm kind of doing it backwards today. I went for my ride earlier and decided to come here now. Anyhow, wanted to go over a couple things on the bike and sort of show you what's what. This camera here is replaced. It's another old camera that I've used to replace that one camera that fell off during the ride, and that sucked, but you know, it is what it is. So anyway, here, I thought I'd go over the bike. Most of you already know. It is a 2002 Royal Enfield Bullet 500. This is a leftover from the 50s era motorcycles. Even though it's a 2002, the design hadn't changed much. Some of the electronics, these electronics right here, you know, they weren't being used back in the 50s. And the electric starter hump on the front, and that thing is, it's always a disaster waiting to happen. This particular year's design, that's just the way that was. I use the kicker most of the time anyway. You're really more at one with the bike when you use the kicker. That's my feelings on it. You got the triangular toolboxes. You got the pedestrian slicer on the front. They upgraded the turn signals, the indicators, trafficators, however you call them. Redid the rear tail light assembly several times just because I've never really liked how that looked. And I like how this one works now, but the factory setup was on there for so long. It etched the paint on the fender, so I can reckon it one of these days I'll have to deal with that. Put these soft saddlebags on here. They're Royal Enfield. They come from Enfield Gear, who are the distributors for the United States. I have also replaced the factory tires with the Shinko 777s. Fantastic tires in comparison to the stockers. That's the factory carburetor. It's basically my Kuni carburetor, though it's one that was contracted strictly for Royal Enfield, so it's called the MyCarb. I had to upjet because I changed out the air cleaner. This used to be a big square box similar to the battery box on the other side. The Ace air filter. There is a guy online. He just loves these bikes. He does all sorts of parts, head work, and performance modifications to these bikes. So if you do get one, especially one of these older era, though he's becoming quickly familiar with some of the newer era bikes. I went with the Ace air canister because to me it looks like a coffee can, and I don't know, to me it looks the part on the bikes, almost steampunk. This right here is a Dyna exhaust. It was a friend of mine's. He had put an aftermarket exhaust on there, and he had the slip-ons just sitting around, and it fit right on. In fact, all I had to do was the bracket that you see there behind the foot peg, the passenger foot peg. So I knocked some holes in that baffle and put it on there, and it sounds fantastic, and it was free. Can't beat free. I changed the mirrors over to these bar end mirrors. Original owner was the one that put this saddle on here. It used to have a bench seat that went straight back. I love the way it looks. I wouldn't change it for anything. One of the changes I really like are these horns. It had a tiny little meat horn. It was just a joke, but yeah, that hurts. And so some of the other work I've done, you know, there's nothing really gone wrong with the bike that I had to work on, but I've done the brakes just because I felt like the front brake, it really wasn't grabbing right. So I pulled it apart, put new brake pads in, but I sanded them in so that they were contoured. You know, when I first put them in, covered them in chalk. When you put them back on the bike, apply the brake, then what you find is the brake was only touching, the brake pads were only touching a certain part of the drum. So I would go and sand those high spots down with a sander. Now, when I hit the brake, both shoes will push out and grab over nearly the entire length of each brake pad. So the braking up front was improved dramatically. I changed the headlight over to this British style 7-inch headlamp. The United States force any bike to be imported with a certain amount of adjustability for the headlight. So the 7-inch is thrown out the window. And so they get a 5 3/4 inch, and then they have adjustable screws and a bracket that wraps around the front, and it doesn't look right on this bike. So I changed that up. I also changed over much of the lighting to LEDs. And one of the reasons is because the charging system isn't that strong. On its best day, it's just not that strong. So one of the things I wanted to do is I wanted to take the burden off of it. Take the burden off of it having to charge up the battery so often. So I included LEDs and all the dummy gauges, all the warning lights and things like that, they're all LED now. The one thing I did have to do that was a mechanical breakdown was I had to change out the alternator, which required pulling the primary cover off, and really isn't that difficult of a job. Probably the hardest part was just waiting for the part to come in. It took about 2 weeks to get. But once it came in, it's a fairly straightforward job. Switched it out. You know, I had to do a bit of testing at the regulator, testing at the rectifier, testing at the wires where they come out of the alternator. Ultimately figured out it was the alternator. Changed it out, and it's been golden ever since. All the other work that I've done was work that I chose to do. Changing out the chain, taking the wheels off to go get new tires and things like that. Oh, and upgrading the carburetor, the jets in the carburetor because of increasing the airflow, the intake, and the exhaust. You have to upjet. You run lean, you're just going to burn a hole in the piston, and that's not going to do you any good. Then you're off your bike. So at any rate, that's my talk around the bike right now. I don't even know if I'll use it. Okay, so now I'm going to walk you around kickstarting this bike. It's already warm, so there's not a lot that needs to be done. I like to have it on the center stand. I'm tall enough that even when the bike is on the center stand, I don't have to sit on the seat in order to do this. So, realizing, of course, that the GoPro doesn't really focus in a lot on these gauges, I'll go ahead and talk you through it. But this is the amp meter, and I'll give you a demonstration here. So when you roll the cylinder around, you see the amp meter deflect to the left. That means that there's a charge going to the coil right now. So you know you're more or less right at top dead center. Happens to coincide with when the kicker gets really stiff. So the kicker feels really stiff right now, and that's at the top of the compression stroke. It's ready to get pushed out. That's when you use the decompressor, open it up momentarily, kick past it. You can hear the bike breathe when you do. So now that it's at top dead center, I'm going to kick it through one more time so you can see it deflected. I'm just going to open up the decompressor, push the kicker down just enough to get that to click off again. Now you're good to kickstart it. So there you go. So now I can step off of the center stand here. And we'll go bump around for another little ride. I set out to talk about a bunch of other stuff. And yeah, what's funny is I get on my bike and I just can't remember what it was I wanted to talk about. I guess that's the effect of my bike clearing my head. You know, I try not to get tangled up in things that are too political as far as up for discussion on a motorcycle, because honestly, this motovlog is as much for me as it is anybody else. And if all I'm going to do is have a one-way conversation with myself about politics or about viewpoints on any variation of things out there, well then, you know, for one thing, all I'll be doing is potentially pissing off half of my collective audience, which is right now maybe 55 subscribers. So, you know, either I'll be pissing off half the people out there, and that's not what I'm trying to do here. I mean, I've seen it. I know everybody else who watches motovlogs and everything else has seen it. People will intentionally pick a controversial topic just so it generates a lot of activity on their vlogs page. And I guess for those people who have monetized and have commercials pop on before, during your motovlogs, perhaps that helps you in some way, because then you're just counting clicks, and it's a way to stir controversy and get a lot of people to actively participate in the comment section. But I personally, I don't want to create a comment section at the bottom of my motovlogs. I don't like to create a lot of controversy to where it just becomes a shouting match in the comment section on my vlogs. That's not really what I'm looking for. And you know, if you do, and that's what you're into, hey, great. It's not to say that I plan on being so bland and uninteresting that there'll never be any controversy. Certainly not. I'm sure as I get more comfortable with the motovlogging, or buy some credibility with some of my subscribers, perhaps I can be a little more opinionated about things, or a little more outspoken about my own beliefs in regards to certain things, political, religious, socioeconomic, or what have you. But because I establish credibility and rapport with my audience, then perhaps I can engage in that kind of thing a little more often. But really, I just like strolling about the internet, being a good-hearted person, and really focusing on that rather than focusing on our differences. And I know that sounds like some kind of hippie movement or something like that, you know, but I can't imagine it offends anybody. I like to work on things that unify folks. You know, there's such a wide variety of people who ride motorcycles. The music, you know, music crosses all those boundaries as well. So long as your songs aren't pointedly political, music appeals to a very wide group of people. So if you notice, the three things that I vlog about and the three things that I typically take interest in such a public way would be music, motorcycles, cigars, things of that nature. So, you know, there are things that cross all socioeconomic backgrounds and geopolitical differences and things like that. You can have liberals and conservatives who like to smoke cigars, or like to ride motorcycles, and like to listen to music. And it's that commonality of mankind that I seek to engage with these types of things, and not necessarily those things that separate us. Although I will occasionally have a rant. And of course I'll leave the comments open so people can make those assertions for themselves, and or disabuse me of one of my incorrect understandings of something. And it'll all be in great fun. But before I get to that point, I feel like I owe it to my audience and my potential subscriber list to build some rapport with them and demonstrate that I am a decent guy, and I'm not looking to just stir controversy and conflict for the sake of getting more clicks, more likes. So thank you folks for watching. I really do appreciate it. I appreciate every comment that comes in. And right now, with such a small subscriber list and only a couple of vlogs that I have, I can stay on top of every single comment. So if you're looking to reach me about something, please go ahead and comment. If you want to ask me about some of my other vlogs and interests, go ahead and send me a message, a private message or otherwise, on the discussion portion of the Google Plus system, which is completely hideous. But go ahead and hit me there, and I will get back to you. You don't see that every day, do you? Oh, maybe you do. Maybe you're one of those people that sees that every day.